Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, guys, but this movie has nothing to do with the city of Arendelle. I'm just throwing that out there for any Disney fan that happens to walk into this theater and is confused when Ghostbusters music starts. So Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is the direct sequel to Ghostbusters Afterlife, which came out a couple years ago up to this point. This was directed by Gil Kenan, who brought you Monster House back in the day. He also co-wrote Frozen Empire alongside Jason Reitman. This is the same writing team behind Ghostbusters Afterlife. And a lot of the same players that you grew to know in Afterlife are returning here. McKenna Grace, Paul Rudd, Finn Wolfhard, Carrie, Coon, etc. And the Spengler family returns to the iconic NYC firehouse where the original Ghostbusters have taken ghostbusting to the next level. When the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes an evil force, Ghostbusters new and old must come together to protect their home and save the world from a second ice age. Now let me start by saying this, the trailers for this movie made it look really cool. There is an abundance of really neat ideas in Frozen Empire. The villain being chief among them. This is a really cool looking CGI villain here, and you absolutely feel the danger once their presence actually becomes apparent. And there are some brilliant character moments that are sprinkled throughout this thing, but I just can't help but think that Afterlife is better than this movie. And when I reviewed this movie a couple years ago, I said that I had a lot of fun with it and I really enjoyed it, really liked it. Did not come without its problems, a few of which Frozen Empire fixes, and I'll get to the big one. But in a sense, Frozen Empire can also be very frustrating the more I think about it, because a lot of the same problems that I talked about when I reviewed Afterlife a couple years ago, those are still there. But let's talk about the good stuff. McKenna Grace once again steals the show as Phoebe Spengler, Egon's granddaughter. Like, come on, she looks like a Spengler, she sounds like a Spengler, she walks like a Spengler. She is so enthusiastic to be on this set, and she definitely understands the assignment. Her storyline in this movie kind of confused me in a sense, though, because I was like, wait a minute, didn't you just save the world in Afterlife? And aren't you the one that's kind of responsible for the Spenglers being put back into the spotlight? And now you kind of have to fight to get the title of Ghostbusters back because you're 15 years old? Yeah, it felt a little funky to me, and it felt like a storyline that we have seen in thousands of other movies before. But McKenna Grace is still damn good in this movie. One of my personal favorite new characters that we've met in one of these many legacy sequels we've gotten. And one of my big problems with Afterlife, I remember talking about it, Paul Rudd was not in Afterlife nearly enough. Well, Frozen Empire definitely remedies that. If you're a fan of Paul Rudd, this is the movie for you. And viewers, I dare you to go and find me somebody who dislikes Paul Rudd. It is probably going to be one of the most difficult tasks of your lives. But joking aside, I was actually very impressed by Paul Rudd's performance here. Not only does he bring the usual comedy that you come to expect from him, and he had me howling, but there's a lot of tenderness and warmth that he brings to the drama. Because he's stepping in as kind of the stepfather in this Spengler household, and he plays very well off of McKenna Grace. There's some clear friction there. He plays very well off of Carrie Coon once again, and Carrie Coon in her own right is very good in this movie. But those to me were the two standouts, Paul Rudd and McKenna Grace. The old Ghostbusters they brought in, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd gets a lot of really fun stuff to do. Ernie Hudson as Zeddemore honestly gives one of his better performances in the franchise in this movie. And I don't remember if she was in Afterlife, but you have Melnitz returning here, the original Ghostbusters secretary, who I've always found hilarious. Like, this just feels like a quintessential good time at the movies. Good legacy sequel, great character development for the new people that we're supposed to be following, but you also pay really nice tribute to the old. For the most part, Bill Murray's in this movie for probably about 10 minutes tops. And that honestly, to me, is the big downfall of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, because even though you have a lot of really cool things happening here, really cool villain, great character moments, lots of phenomenal looking CGI, the visuals in this movie, top notch for a Ghostbusters film. But my first thought as I was leaving this theater tonight, like, you could have very easily trimmed 10 minutes off of this movie, and you probably wouldn't have missed much. That first Ghostbusters film just crossed the hour 45 mark, and it was a perfect pace. I reviewed that last year for the Halloween special, and I wasn't the biggest fan of Ghostbusters going into that, but as I age and as I get older, the more I start to appreciate Ghostbusters for what it is. And 10-year-old me probably knew that this was inevitable, but Ghostbusters, that original film, is a comedic masterpiece. There's times where I think that's one of my top 10 favorite comedies of all time, maybe even top 5. That's how much I love it. Because none of the films that succeeded that original have lived up to that hype. So Frozen Empire knows that it has a huge legacy to live up to, but it never really tries to surpass what that original movie did. One thing that it could have absolutely matched was that pacing, though, and that was a huge problem that I had with Afterlife. Yeah, the climax of Afterlife wasn't really my cup of tea. It's almost like they flip-flopped it here. Because the climax for Frozen Empire was a lot of fun, really cool, super big, gigantic, as you would expect from a spring blockbuster. But everything before that just feels so slow-paced. And like I said, you have great character moments. I don't want to give all of them away, but McKenna Grace and the stuff that she does in this movie, I give props to Frozen Empire for exploring depths of a Ghostbusters movie that hadn't really been explored or touched on. So with that in mind, I actually kind of feel like if you trimmed out 2, maybe 3 characters out of this movie, like you absolutely would have had a stronger, more focused narrative. Because as it sits, there are at least a dozen different characters that we're following here and a dozen different little plot lines here. Like, I'll be honest, I don't even think we needed to see Finn Wolfhard in this movie. And yeah, part of me saying that might be because I've kind of soured and grown tired of Finn Wolfhard at this point. I'm sorry, I just don't think he's that great. Unless he's in It, of course. That's the big one for me. I know he's famous for Stranger Things, but even then, Mike isn't even that great of a character. Like, Frozen Empire gives Finn Wolfhard nothing to do in this movie. Actually, I take that back. There's, a small little subplot involving him and Slimer, which is never really resolved. And the friends that you meet in Afterlife, including Podcast, which, good God, that makes me so mad that they still named him Podcast. I swear to God, I've said it before and I'll say it again. That would be like naming me YouTube because of this beautiful community that we've created together. How stupid does that sound? But yeah, Podcast, Lucky, 2 characters that you met in Afterlife and that you got behind, not really given much to do. And it almost feels like an obligation to have them in this movie because they were in Afterlife. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel like a character's presence is obligated. I want to feel like a character's presence is warranted. And for the most part, man, I mean, some of these characters that we met in that original film, even the older brother, even Trevor Spangler, you could have cut them from this movie, and you probably would have a more fluid narrative. Because as it sits, I was having fun with what we had. I had fun watching McKenna Grace's character develop more. I had a lot more fun watching more Paul Rudd in this. And yes, for those of you wondering, I loved seeing Kumail Nanjiani in this movie. He looked like he was so excited to be there. And yeah, even though it did feel like his character was a direct carbon copy of someone that you met in the first Ghostbusters, I didn't care. Kumail Nanjiani was so funny in this. And good to see that he's still doing well. I hear that he wasn't really taking the Eternals criticisms extremely well, and that he was kind of feeling dejected for a little while as an artist, but good on him for getting back out there. I'm rooting for him. And that's one other thing that I'd like to address. I said something in my Afterlife review along the lines of, yeah, nostalgia, give me more. And part of me is kind of thinking, be careful what you wish for, 25-year-old Zack. Because if you ask for too much fan service, you're going to get something like Frozen Empire, where you have literally a direct callback to the opening of that 1984 film. Ray Stantz walking through a library and you see a ghost librarian shushing him. Doesn't really add up to anything. It's more like, oh, hey, look fans. See that? See what we did? Pretty cool, right? You remember how great that original movie was? Ah, good times. I disagree with the fans who are saying that this was too reliant on nostalgia. I feel like it all depends on how you look at it, though, because if this were too much nostalgia for me, it would be like every other scene. They would try and be reminding me of how great that 1984 film was. Not like I needed a reminder. So I'm going to give Frozen Empire credit where it's due, because it's trying some super ambitious storyline stuff here. You have some killer performances, especially from Rudd and Grace. The direction here I thought was good. Gil Kenan, I think, directs a good-looking movie. The cinematography and the visuals are nice to look at. But I just think that this studio just didn't learn their lesson from Afterlife and didn't give me as well-paced of a movie as I would have wanted out of a big sequel like this. But despite all that, I'm going to give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a B-. This is far from a bad movie, and far from one of the worst movies that you'll probably see this year. But I think that about wraps it up, guys. Let me know what you thought of Frozen Empire down in the comments section, and what are your memories of watching Ghostbusters? Do you have nostalgia for it? Are you a diehard Ghostbusters fan? Yeah, I can't come up with a rhyme that says, give us a call. But hey, if you're new to the channel, you've stumbled upon us for the first time, welcome. Do consider becoming a subscriber today and tap on that thumbs up as well, because we are ready to talk all things movies and entertainment along with you. Guys, thank you so much again for your continued support of the channel. It really does mean the world. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.